Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to talk about something really powerful, an ancient idea about a kind of dormant energy that, well, supposedly resides inside every single one of us. It's this coiled up potential for like a massive transformation.
All right, let's just jump right in. We're starting with this really mysterious line from an ancient text, the Garanda Samhita. It talks about a coiled serpent and the flame of a lamp, which, you gotta admit, sets a pretty mystical stage for what we're about to get into.
So, what is this coiled serpent, really? I mean, that's the big question, right? Think of it as a symbol for this massive, untapped cosmic energy that's just lying at the very core of who we are, just waiting.
You know, the name itself, Kundalini, literally means coiled up. And that's our first big clue. This isn't some active force that's buzzing around in most of us. Nope. It's a latent potential. It's like a deep well of psychic power, this huge reserve of energy that's there in every single one of us. But most of the time, we don't even know it exists. And this gets into a really cool core tantric idea, the microcosm and the macrocosm. The principle is simple, but it's huge. You aren't separate from the universe. You are the universe in miniature. The idea is that the whole drama, everything that's happening out there in the cosmos, all those forces and energies, it's all being repeated right here, inside your own body. And check out how specific the symbolism is. This isn't just some random snake. It's coiled exactly 3.5 times. Its tail is in its mouth, which creates this kind of closed circuit. It represents this static, unmanifested energy, basically a loaded spring, just waiting for the right push to be released. Okay, so before you can go on any journey, what do you need? You need a map. So let's take a look at the map of this inner world. This is the landscape where this whole journey is supposed to happen.
Now, this is a really important point. This whole journey, it's not happening in your physical body, the flesh and bone part. It's happening in what's called the subtle body. Think of it like an energetic blueprint or an etheric double that coexists with your physical form. This is where all the wiring and the power stations for our psychic energy are located. And on this map, you've got these 7 chakras. These are like the main power stations, or maybe waypoints on the journey. Each one represents a totally different level of consciousness. So the path of Kundalini is this climb, this upward journey, starting from our most basic, earthy survival instincts at the root chakra, all the way up to this state of, well, pure enlightened awareness at the crown.
Okay, so if the chakras are the power stations, then the nadis, well, those are the power lines, the wiring that connects everything. There's this huge complex network of them, but we really need to focus on 3 main ones. You've got the main channel right down the middle, the Sushumna, that's the superhighway for Kundalini's trip upwards. And on either side, you have Ida, which is the lunar or left channel, and Pingala, the solar or right channel.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This ancient picture of the 2 side channels, Ida and Pingala, spiraling around that central Sushumna channel, doesn't that look familiar? People have pointed out for a long time how much it looks like the double helix structure of a DNA molecule. The literal blueprint of life. It's kind of wild, an ancient esoteric map that seems to mirror modern biology.
All right, so we've got the map. We know the pathways. So how do you start the car? How does this journey actually begin? How do you wake up this massive potential energy from its long nap? Well, it's not just one thing. It's usually a combination of different yogic techniques. We're talking about things like sustained physical postures called asanas, the science of breath control or pranayama, using specific sounds or mantras, even symbolic hand gestures, mudras, and these internal muscular locks called bandhas. The whole point of all of this is to generate enough inner heat and vibration to, basically, wake up the serpent. Let's take pranayama, or breath control, for example. It's not as simple as just taking a few deep breaths. The ancient texts get super specific. They lay out this ideal ratio. You inhale for 1 count, you hold that breath for 4 counts, and then you exhale for 2 counts. Why so specific? Because that particular rhythm is seen as the key to building up the pranic energy, the internal pressure needed for an awakening. Okay, so what does it actually feel like? I mean, when this energy finally wakes up, what happens? This isn't just theory, We actually have some incredibly powerful first-hand accounts that describe the raw, unfiltered experience. I mean, listen to this account from a man named Gopi Krishna. It's just explosive. For him, it wasn't gradual. It was a sudden, overwhelming sensory explosion. He describes a roar like a waterfall,
a stream of liquid light shooting up his spine into his brain. And then he just became all consciousness, totally immersed in a sea of light. Can you even imagine? But then you have someone like the 19th century Saint Ramakrishna, and his experience was totally different. It wasn't this big flash of light. He actually felt it as distinct animated movements going up through his body. He described them as fish-like or bird-like or even monkey-like. So for him, it was this series of almost living motions climbing up his spine. And here's a more modern account from an American writer. This person describes it less as a big, one-time event and more like a long-term purification process. They said it felt like this tremendous force was just cascading through their whole system, and it was actively detecting and breaking up old knots of stored emotions or experiences. So more like a deep cleaning. So as you can see, the experience is incredibly personal. There's no one-size-fits-all description. It can show up as physical stuff, like tingling or creeping sensations, or huge emotional releases, like laughing or crying for no reason. People report seeing visions of lights or hearing inner sounds, like bells or flutes. Some people even find their bodies moving into yoga poses all by themselves. The point is, there's a massive range of possibilities.
Okay, so these ancient accounts are pretty mind-blowing. But how does all of this stack up when you look at it through a modern scientific lens? Let's switch gears and see how today's researchers are trying to understand what's going on here.
And what's really interesting is that researchers are finding a bit of a mismatch. See, the classical texts almost always describe this straight shot up the spine, right? Up the sushumna. But in modern clinical cases, people often report a much more complex path. The sensation might start in their feet or legs, travel up the body, go over the head, and then come down the face to end somewhere in the abdomen. It's a full circuit, not just a one-way street. This difference has led to some pretty cool scientific models like the Physio-Kundalini model. A researcher named Itzhak Bentov proposed that there might be a physical explanation for all this. He suggested that when you're in deep meditation, you can create these tiny, rhythmic vibrations or oscillations in your body. And these vibrations could actually stimulate your brain's sensory cortex in a very specific order, which would create the feeling of a current of energy moving through you, mapping perfectly to what people report. So at the end of the day, what are we left with? Well, it doesn't really matter if you look at it through the mystical lens of the ancient yogis or the physiological lens of modern science. Either way, the story of Kundalini points to this profound, transformative potential that might just be hardwired into our own nervous systems. It suggests there's a kind of universal human potential just waiting there to be explored.
If this topic has captured your interest and you'd like to dive deeper, the book is called Kundalini, The Arousal of the Inner Energy by Ajit Mookerjee.